All right, thank y'all for bearing with us. This has been a crazy day. I'm trying to find the chat so I can engage, at least see what's going on. Okay. All right. So what it boils down to is that we're looking at the narrative that's being spun by the French, and we were sent some links by Ohio Player concerning the Natchez that he'd gotten from an archive. And this one's labeled Les Natchez Volume 1. And then you got Chateaubriand's account of what happened. So if you want to go see those pieces, those fine pieces of what they call it, what's it called? Fiction. That's it. Then by all means, check it out. And the last sentence that we have to read on this page is, it says, in contrast to the French tradition, the Natchez and their conflicts with the French have been mostly forgotten in contemporary American historiography. Historian Gordon Sayre attributes this to the fact that both the French and the Natchez were defeated in colonial wars before the birth of the United States. Well, it would stand that would be the case, because if you talk about the Natchez, who were the engineers, it basically shows you that the founding fathers were not so great. That they were a bunch of thieves, crooks, and robbers. It's just my 2 cents. I could be wrong.
Basically, they enslaved them to do a lot of the construction, to build a lot of these buildings and stuff. I mean, it makes sense now when you look back at a lot of these Capitol buildings and structures that was built at that time.
It's ridiculous. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But it is what it is. So I'm trying to figure out if I can pull up. Because that's all that we had on the Natchez, the revolt, from that page, Bones. So is there anything else that we need to cover from the Natchez? Let's see, what was it? The change said. Come back to me in a second. I'm having a hard time remembering, but I know. Hold on. Uh-oh. Let's see. I can't remember. You said that was the Natchez Massacre too, right?
Yeah. Like I said, it's still interesting that over time how they rewrite the story and keep changing the people.
Yeah.
That you'll get stories about the Devil's Bowl and they'll try to give it an African spin to it. But that's why we say timelines are important. Because once you know the timeline, you'll spot the overlay instantly.
Right. Celestial Love says, dang, so what is this info they do not want us to hear? They keep kicking you guys off, but I'm here and ready. Well, it's not that, it's just that I'm not on my regular system, so Wi-Fi is throttled. So that's more of a resource thing than it is a, I don't know, what do you call it? A them not wanting us to know thing. So I'm looking at the Natchez Massacre of 1729, and this does have some overtones of African American, or what they call, it has a slave narrative to it. Which is odd because you're talking about in 1723 there were no colonies in Africa. Or the more correct name at that time, Ethiopia. So there were no colonies in Ethiopia. Then how you gonna have slaves coming from Africa being in the Americas?
Bingo. And their records show that they only had ports along the coast.
Right. So let me see what. Yeah, for those that are interested in the books that we talked about concerning Natchez from the French writer's perspective, the Ohio Play has dropped those links in the chat. The last one he just dropped was the Natchez Volume 2. You gotta remember, these are basically fiction novels that, like Bone says, romanticize what actually happened with the Natchez Revolt. So again, gotta take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, that's why it's important, again, to still know the timelines and the names of the people, so when you see it, you know the difference.
Now, one thing I would like to go over is the Chickasaw Wars, because we covered that, but it seems like some things are starting to, I don't know.
Well, yeah, the difference is now you know what started the war.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
That the Natchez were living amongst them, and people came after the Natchez, causing a split between the Choctaw and the Chickasaw. But it's also showing what we talked about before, that people made choices along the way. Some people chose to rock with the French, some rock with the British, some said, this is what we're going to do.
Oh yeah, Ohio Place is Dragon Canoe. That's right. That name rings a bell.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How you forget a name like Dragon Canoe? So I want to go in and read that portion where it talks about the Choctaw tax. And remember, this is during the time when the Natchez the French are trying to eliminate the Natchez. So let me go ahead and put this up the link, so we at least have some talking points. James says that the black chief of the Natchez was slapping the French in sewer. He would do that. He would go there. Grand Rising Lady J. He would go there with him. Why he go there? Why he go there, Bob? Grand Rising came back.
Please, care.
We're for those of you who just returned again for the 5th time. We're covering the Chickasaw Wars because they tie in, or actually the Choctaw attacks, because they tie in directly with the Natchez finding refuge. What is it? Refuge. Finding refuge with the Chickasaw. So, hold on. So,
Peace, cuz. Hope all is well with you.
so I'm reading the right up under where it reads Chickasaw attacks from the Chickasaw Wars. That I put the link in the chat. It says Governor of Louisiana and founder of New Orleans, Jean-Baptiste Le Moyne de Bienville, determined to stop Chickasaw trade with the British in 1721. He was able to incite the Choctaw to begin to raid Chickasaw villages and to ambush pack trains along the traders' path leading to Charleston, South Carolina. So he basically instigated a riot between the Choctaw and Chickasaw. And it says in response, the Chickasaw regrouped their villages more tightly for defense and cemented relations with the British source of guns by establishing a settlement at Savannahtown, South Carolina. In 1723, they blocked French traffic on the Mississippi River by occupying Chickasaw Bluff near the present-day Memphis and bargained for peace with the Choctaw. Bienville himself was recalled to France in 1724. Good grief. Can you imagine being on the Mississippi and you can't move forward because you blocked? Now, I don't know how wide the Mississippi is. I don't claim to know how wide the Mississippi is. How long would it take to turn a boat around in the Mississippi? It's not. I don't think it would be that easy. So, hold on. So Bienville was recalled to France in 1724, and on and off over the following years, the French successfully reignited the Indian conflict. So they're always reigniting conflict between the tribes and just watch and see what happens. It said the Choctaw pursued their familiar hit and run tactics, ambushing hunting parties, killing traders' horses, devastating croplands after using superior numbers to drive the Chickasaw into their forts, and killing peace emissaries. Illinois and Iroquois occasionally pitched in from the north as well. This war of attrition effectively wore the Chickasaw down, reaching a crisis level in the late 1730s and especially the early 1740s after they lapsed due to strife with the Choctaw. The bloody harassment resumed in the 1750s. The Chickasaw remained obstinate, their situation forcing them to adhere even more closely to the British. So even the Illini and Iroquois pitched in. Interesting. So I read the campaign of 1736 and 1739. But I have not read the campaign of 1752. Doodle Vision says it takes a round to turn the boat around even a day. So my whole point of that is if they got the Mississippi blocked up, you're trapped. And you basically are sitting duck if you don't have any cover, because all somebody gotta do is just take pop shots from me from the banks. I'm just saying. And this guy here says supposed campaign of 1752. Supposed campaign? Really? That's what we doing? The disgraced Bienville was replaced by Marquis de Vaudreuil in 1742, who continued to encourage Choctaw harassment. He eventually came to the view that another grand effort was needed to end the Chickasaw threat. Once and for all, he pleaded his case to his superiors. Many sources describe such an expedition taking place in 1752. It is to be noted that none of those sources mention any further details beyond saying it was an exact repeat of 1736. Dawson A. Phelps determined that the grand effort never took place. Refer to Atkinson, page 78. Although there was a strong Choctaw attack instigated and supported by the French. I don't know, this just seems
Like somebody trying to keep their hands clean.
yeah. That's exactly what's happening. Somebody's definitely trying to keep their hands clean. Their hands clean. Ohio Pledge just dropped all types of links in the chat.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, one side supported the British, the other side supported the French. But we know it was really about them wanting the Natchez.
Right. And because the Chickasaw, hold on, who's it? Because the Choctaw took them in. That's why they got attacked. So had they not taken the Natchez in, they wouldn't have got attacked as early as they did. But they would have been. But they eventually would have got attacked because we all know that all Indians got attacked, except for the Iroquois who end up, blending in with their masters. So.
But that lets you know at that time that they didn't care for them. So if they attack them, when they attack them, they attacked everybody because they attack because they want another group of Indians, and because you're allying them and giving them a place to stay, that's why they're killing your people.
Right. Take care of your brothers and your cousins like you're supposed to. Doodle Vision said that's why.
That should let you know they don't care about you if they're willing to kill your people for taking care of their own relatives.
Right. Then Doodle says that's why to this day, Southern Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana have a French vibe. Interesting. To say the very least. So what else we got to talk about as far as the Natchez? Do we have any other links?
Give me a second, kind of noisy background.
Okay. And we had to cut the music off so the stream will stay. So again, we work with limited resources. That's my fault.
Do we need some music? I don't
know. Don't do that. Well, on the outcome of the Chickasaw War, says that armed to the teeth in their remote and heavily fortified villages, the Chickasaw maintained themselves, albeit with great loss to both populations and way of life. What's going on, Dodo?
Peace, James. Peace, Doodoo Brown.
And it says the French never defeated the Chickasaw. Enmity between the Illinois and the Chickasaw continued long after the war. So the French never defeated the Chickasaw. That's interesting. And of course, the Chickasaw and the Illini, and also the Iroquois, obviously had some serious beef because they being the Illini and the Iroquois, were siding with the French. That's crazy. But again, it goes back to, if you think that you're going to be removed or they're just going to take your whole family out, then you got to do what you got to do. I'm not mad at or as upset as I originally was with the tribes for what they did. I'm more focused now on what they're currently doing. Because you can't control what your ancestors did. But you can control what you do now. And you can control how you respect other tribes or how you disrespect other tribes. Now that can be controlled. But yeah.
Greetings, one and all. Apologize for the lateness. Call me today. I am the storm chaser. We got hit with several
Peace,
tornadoes.
Storm Chaser. Peace, Storm Chaser.
So you got hit with tornadoes.
Yeah, man. Tore up this area pretty much. It went all everywhere but where we are. So I guess all the fury over the weekend just caused the storms to come in together. Brother Thomas, you made a valid point when you said about not being able to change what happened in the past with where we are currently. My issue is when you have tribes and tribal leaders that continue to carry on this same narrative that they had no skin in the game when they did what they did, and they continue to paint this picture as if no, it wasn't us. But to continue on with what happened with the Natchez, they reestablished everything that they needed to do in Texas. So that would probably be the next journey. That's why I say that Texas was Megiddo. This was a battle of Armageddon when everything started coming together. And those Illini, and those Sioux better when you start looking up again these volunteers. And I always say came out of Kentucky and Tennessee.
Oh man.
People. That's why you have again the Tennessee Volunteers, and you have the Fighting Illini in Illinois. Why were they called the Fighting Illini? These are the same people under all these different names, but they're the same group, and they merge in Texas, which is why to the south, you have in southern Texas, you have Fayette County, you have Beaumont, Texas, you have all these French, all, and then as you start going up on coming into East Texas, that's where you get into Natchez, you get into Navasota, all these other places to where those that came from Mexico, and this is what's going to lead again into the Texas Mexican War later on. So all of this is tying in to what the Natchez, because they had already set up shop again under the auspices or the name of the Caddo. So when you look up the Caddo and Caddo Mills, Texas, all this area, this is the last stand to where you have the Wichita, which is still just a mispronunciation of the Washita. Same group of people. We just reassembled in Texas, and the Texas American War was our last stand, which everybody thinks that the Texas American War ended with Santa Anna and Stephen F. Austin and all the rest of them. It didn't end there. They were still fighting up until the 20th century. I yield the mic.
James, could you repeat that one more time, the pronunciation and the mispronunciation, please?
Wichita, which you would find were one of the battles that the Wichita, which are the Washita, lost. That's why it's called Wichita Falls, Texas. You have a Wichita, Kansas, and you have a Wichita Falls, Texas. That whole barrier there that we know as, and it's ironic, Tornado Alley, that was our last stand. From Kansas all the way down into Texas. That was the last stand. So, well, I would even say going up into Iowa. So I would go as far as Iowa. That from Iowa on down, that is where we took our last stand. And we're still fighting these battles well into the 20th century. Well up leading, that's why I said all this leads up into the Black Wall Street falling, and even leading up until just before World War II. That's how far the battles kept going on between the Indians and these Europeans and these Métis, aka Métis, and mestizos that were coming from the South. I yield the mic.
Basically, if you think about it, constant war.
Just give you another example. The French were trying to chase the Natchez up through Texas, coming through the Red River. Well, the Indians that lived along the Red River, they told the French to go down a river that actually dead ended. So when they finally got the ship turned around, the French were like, kill everybody that lives along the shore. And I'll put those links in the back chat as well a little bit later. So I apologize, I'm on my phone. But but it was just so, like I say, amazing on how they keep trying to rewrite history and give you different names for these wars, but they were just a continuation of the same war. And when you, like I said, when you look up the Texas Mexican War, and then it became the American Texan War. Like I say, this was still well into the 20th century as you get into the first part of the 20th century, which is why on the border of Mexico and what we know as Texas today, the U.S. troops sent the Seminoles because they were the only ones that could uh, pacify what they kept calling Mexicans, which were actually us anyway. Then that's why I said those that you see as Mexicans today are not Mexicans. Well, they are Mexicans because they are Mexica, but they were calling all of us Mexicans because we spoke Spanish. Like I said, it was a Spanish dialect. Even to this day, that's why I said the names never changed. You look at all these names of these, especially in Texas, all the names of these places. You have Waco, you have Waxahachie. I mentioned Navasota earlier. You have Nacogdoches, which tells you that's a settlement of the Natchez. These people never ever left. They just took a last stand. That's why you find so many of us. You'll find a majority. I guarantee you right now, at least 80% of the chat has Texas ties, and they can't figure out why. That is because we merged all in Texas and let that be our last stand. I yield the mic.
I know I personally seen it in my own genealogy. I got a whole half a family that's out there now. Out there 17, 1800s, they're out that way. And it shouldn't be too far-fetched. I mean, let's just look in our lifetime. Don't we see in our lifetime how it's so easily they change our titles and our description from colored to Negro to Black to African American? I mean, basically, it's the same thing they're doing. And before you know it, maybe done rewrit you out of history, created some romance story about a group of people, and everybody going for it.
And that's exactly what they're doing. And that's what you had mentioned earlier about they keep claiming this as being slave revolts, slave revolts. And that's what they try to hide it under. And you think about all of these um, when the volunteers started coming in to Texas, and they were being what it was, the volunteers were provoking those of us that lived in Texas to continue this battle. You hear about, the provoked, these Indians attacked us, and we don't know why they attacked us. Yeah, because you keep coming up on the land. But it was to try to wipe the Natchez off the planet, because they knew if they wiped the Natchez off the planet, no more roads could be built, and it would eliminate one form of communication. Because if they're using their ships to try to control the rivers, and then they are cutting off the roadways, then we have no way to interact with one another, because it was a
Bingo.
network. So if you blow up the roads, and anybody knows that if you've been in the military with the Army Corps of Engineers, they can make artificial roads, and then they destroy permanent roads. They make
Yep.
roadways over rivers. You call them bridges today. All of this was taking place. And the Natchez were the Army Corps of Engineers. So if you can kill those that are able to make the roadways, now the people can come in and make their own roadways, and then they can try to control the rivers. But if you can get them on land, if you can surround them with ships, and they can't get away, they can't maneuver via using the waterways, and you cut off the roads, now you have them blocked. And this is what they were doing when they were sieging up on Texas. And I'm glad Ohio Player is putting all that in the chat, because when you see what was taking place and who was doing what, now you understand why so many of your relatives were coming here to Texas, because we were saying no more, because we knew we couldn't be pushed any further west, because we knew that those Plains Indians, aka the Native Americans, aka your Mongoloids, were all in that area. So we had nowhere else to go. Where else were we going to go? So we had no choice but to fight. But they try to tell you that all these people, these colored people, these Negroes came as slaves to Texas. And that's a lie from the pitsy H-double hockey sticks. We were already here. Because why are you trying to bring slaves into a territory when you're fighting all these so-called Indians off? Doesn't make sense. I yield the mic.
And also, too, slavery in Texas, according to Texas history, couldn't have happened when they said it happened, because Texas didn't become a state until well after 1860 something, or 1840 something.
Yep,
So
the 1845. From 1836 to 1845, Texas was a republic. But what they don't tell you is that Texas, as we know it, did not look like Texas. It was only Texas east of the Brazos River. So everything along that Brazos River, that's why I said when you get into Navasota, talk about Waco, talk about Waxahachie, all of that, if you look at all these cities that run along what we call Interstate 35 today, these were our people all along Interstate 35. And that's
I
what they
mean, look
keep
at the
trying to
strategy.
rewrite and say, go ahead, brother. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just adding on, and also look at the strategy. If you're trying to invade and set up something, you have to cut off communication, transportation, and supplies. Because if you don't do that, then that's a forever going on war. War is won by supplies and resources being limited to one side. So now you can no longer defend yourself. And that's basically their strategy. And they just kept doing it on and on and on. You can see the start of separating us, how we're separated today in different areas and different groups. You can see the start of it, giving you a better idea on what happened and what was the purpose of it happening. To stop communication, to stop the spreading of back and forth. As long as there was a connection, you can't forget. Break the connection.
here's the thing I find interesting is that, based off of what we know, based off the information that's been presented and being exposed, our ancestors started in South America, and then they ended up back going close to South America again, or Central America. So they ended up in Texas. So they're almost in the same vicinity where where they started from. Is that?
And the lot of that they thought that they were going to wipe out. One thing that I would encourage everyone to look up is the Great Flood of 1927, because the Great Flood of 1927 was really one of the last straws when it came to dividing us. As we know, like I said, they blew up the levees. I'm not going to get into that. They've said it. Let's just say this. Without a shadow of a doubt, because they've admitted that they blew up the levees in 1927. And then you go back and you look at Katrina and you will see the same results. So I'm not going to come out and say they blew up the levees. I'll let you say that yourself if they did that with Katrina. But they admitted in 1927 that they blew up the levees, and it caused a great flood all the way up through Arkansas and then to parts of Missouri. Well, that was all our farmland, because at that time we were quote unquote sharecroppers. We owned that land. So when they wiped you out and then they came back, now you no longer own the land, and the majority of the people never came back south that left. They ended up in Chicago, they ended up in Detroit, they ended up in New York. So they never came back when it came to those that were flooded out in the Mississippi Delta. They just didn't come back. So now those are the powers that be own the land. But they admitted in 1927 that they blew up the levees, and 2 years later, or a little less than 2 years later, you will find out that that caused the great market crash of 1929, because you had nobody working the crops anymore. Think about it.
James, if I'm correct, isn't that the same year they put the clause in that the Army Corps engineers can't be found liable for the work that they did? If I'm correct, I think it was 1929.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There was never any issue with that, with the levees that the Natchez built. Because again, the only territory when the French were trying to do what they needed to do was the port of New Orleans. That was it. As you can see, as we keep reading about, they keep saying, oh, defeated, defeated, defeated. And you're going to see later where it says the French literally packed up and left. This is, but no sellout says all the time about timelines. This was what led up to the Haitian revolt. And everybody gets, oh, these were Africans. No, this was a concerted effort amongst the Indians. Whatever you want to call us, if you want to say Negroes, go ahead and do that. If you want to say Carib, Arawak, you go ahead and say that. I'm saying it was a concerted effort by Indians, because you're going to find out that there were Indians from Florida that also came into Haiti that assisted in the revolt. This was a concerted effort. This was not just isolated incidences happening all at the same time. Come on, son. I yield the mic.
I put the link to the Mississippi flood of 1927 in the chat. Now I'll go ahead and read it. It says the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927 was the most destructive river flood of the history of the United States, with 27,000 square miles inundated up to a depth of 30 feet. To try to prevent future floods, the federal government built the world's longest systems of levees and floodways. After they destroyed the levee, they're gonna build a new one. Okay, 94% of the more than 630,000 people affected by the flood lived in the states of Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, most of the Mississippi Delta. More than 20,000. Here's a mess. More than 200,000 African Americans were displaced from their homes along the lower Mississippi River. We know they couldn't have been African Americans because that term didn't exist, and you couldn't be enumerated as African American until 2000. So, stop it.
Timeline. When they wrote it? I don't even want to know.
It says more than 200,000 African Americans were just. Oh, yeah, I already read that. It says as a result of this disruption, many joined the Great Migration from the South to the North and the Midwestern industrial cities rather than return to rural agricultural labor. This massive population movement increased from World War I until 1970. And it just basically confirms what James was saying. And it says the events. It said the flood began with extremely heavy rains in the central basin of the Mississippi in the summer of 1926. By September, the Mississippi tributaries in Kansas and Ohio were swollen to capacity. On Christmas Day in 1926, the Cumberland River at Nashville, Tennessee exceeds 56 feet 2 inches, a level that remains a record this day, higher than the devastating 2010 floods. So, hold on. 56 feet?
Mm-hmm.
Come on, son. I gotta copy James on that. That ain't no, how much, you know how much rain you have to get for the tributary to increase to 56 feet?
Above the level.
Man, with torrential rains, you normally to get a daggone, what, an inch an hour?
Mm-hmm.
56 feet? Come on, man.
But now think about that. 56 feet of water. How many of our ancestral areas in 2019 at the bottom of lakes?
Dude, 56 feet.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of water.
That's because those sucker MCs were trying to circumvent the flow of the Mississippi. And that's what caused the flood. Mother Nature clapped back.
Man.
Easier way to remove a group of people that you can't get on the move. Flood them out. I mean, look at how many people got displaced during Katrina, or during the Houston floods. How many of them people never came back or don't have the resources to ever come back? So now what happens to the land?
I don't know. Well, it goes to them.
I mean, basically, yeah, it goes back to the state or the county because they're going to look at the property as being neglected. Think about it. They use taxes, delinquent taxes, to seize property now. Just because it's flooded out and you can't build nothing on it at the moment, they still going to charge you taxes on it.
That's true. Give a whole new 56 feet above the tributaries. That gives a whole new meaning to the term wetlands. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm. It's an ocean.
Yeah.
That's why I say again, how many of these man-made lakes are actual Indian tribal areas that's just underwater because they couldn't get the people to relocate? You just flooded them out. They told you over 200,000. Over 200,000.
And we know it's more than that, man. I bet you it's more than that. Because they saying 200,000 African Americans. We know that's bull.
You know, I know it's further nonsense. Like I said, just look at the numbers of just do this. Look at the numbers that in Chicago, the influx that went to Chicago, the influx that went to Detroit, and the influx that went to New York and in the DC area. It's way more than 200,000. But again, what kind of anger must you have that you want to wipe a group of people completely off the face of the earth? Think about it. I yield the mic. Oh, I didn't want to end on that sad note, but guess what? We still here. I yield the mic.
So mission not accomplished. Mission not accomplished. Okay. It says that the flooding peaked in lower Mississippi River near Mound Landing, Mississippi, and Arkansas City, Arkansas, and broke levees along the river at least 145 places. No. They busted them. They busted them levees. How's water gonna break levees at 145 places? And how do they count? How do they know that's where the levees broke at 145 places? Unless they put some explosives there to break the levees. Okay.
There you go. That's what I was going to say. To quote that much hated black representative of the 1970s, J.J. Evans, dynamite. That's why I said they blew it up. They admit to blowing it up.
Because you know what else happened in between them years? The Great Migration. But between them years, what? Over 1.5 million so-called African Americans went to the Detroit area alone from the South.
And that's why I say it was much more than 200,000. What it is, they're trying to paint this picture that we were not already here. So if they lower the numbers, then they can be like, oh yeah, well, everybody came over here and these African slaves and they were here and they were there. But you keep looking at the numbers, you're saying, okay, well, you tell me 200,000, but then you look at the Great Migration from the South to the North in one city alone. That lets you know how are you going to have you're going to have 6 times the amount end up in Detroit than what you said that left the entire Mississippi Delta. Come on, son. You just look at the numbers, that new math that they're trying to do. I yield the mic.
So this apart from the Great Migration, it states, during the Great Migration, beginning around 1920, blacks left the South in search of better jobs as well as to escape Jim Crow laws. During the first wave of the Great Migration, thousands of African Americans, so-called, settled in Detroit as part of the total of 1.5 million blacks who left the South in the first half of the 20th century, looking for opportunities in the Northeast and Midwest.
Hold on, Brother Bones. Hold on. Now, this is the same group of people that said that they left the South because of Jim Crow, but didn't leave the South right after the Civil War because of slavery. They left because of Jim Crow laws, but you in shackles 300, 400 years, and you didn't leave then? Oh, man. Man, go ahead, Brother No Sellout. I'm sorry, man. Go ahead.
I ain't got nothing to say. Go ahead, Bo.
No, it's just showing you why timelines, and when you don't pick and choose history, you just take it all, put it all on the table, and break it all down. You get a better idea on what was really going on. And remember, this is 1.5 just to Detroit. I bet you if you look up the other cities around the same time, you're going to see millions going there.
Thanks, Natchez.
Welcome.
I mean, if they hadn't held off as long as they did, the massacres would have happened a lot faster. That's just crazy. So let me finish what I was reading as far as on the Mississippi flood of 1927. It says the water flooded more than 27,000 square miles of land and left more than 700,000 people homeless. Approximately 500 people died as a result of the flooding. Monetary damages due to the flooding reached approximately $1 billion, which was 1/3 of the federal budget in 1927. If the event were to have occurred in 2007, the damages would have been around $930 billion or a trillion. Measured in 2007 US dollars. Do you realize that could bankrupt us now?
Yep. But that's how you eliminated the wealth of these people. You got to remember, we talking about 1920s. This is when you had so-called Black Wall Streets popping up in all the areas where we resided at. So how do you bring them all down? Simple. You flood out and you destroy the mechanism that allowed our ancestors to generate wealth. Now replacing them in areas, now they're in a new area. They have to go out, get jobs to make incomes to live in this new area. They went from being owners to renters. Again.
And then shortly after that is when you see the Dust Bowl of the 1930s all up in that region of Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, because here comes this great influx of those that we know as Melungeons and Europeans that know nothing about the land and didn't know what they were doing. Because again, you think about how could this Dust Bowl have taken over places like Iowa and Nebraska and Kansas that were known for corn? Because what is Nebraska? What is Nebraska? What is their mascot? Aren't they corn huskers? But then if you move the people, the people get moved or they move themselves out of the land, you no longer have these Indians, these so-called, because again, how can Africans, West Africa, I'm not, like I said, I love y'all West Africans if you're a real West African, but how can West Africans come over here by the millions and till the soil and know about the soil and know how to grow crops when the Europeans, aka the Melungeons, don't even know how to do it? Because we're looking at the 1930s and the Dust Bowl, and they would tell you how the Dust Bowl took place because they didn't know how to till the land. They just kept destroying the land and didn't know what they were doing. And so now you have no more trees, you have no more crops, you have no water coming that way. Dust Bowl, I yield the mic.
And you know what else is funny? They want to keep giving you this narrative of African slaves. So if these African slaves came to the Americas and got super smart to do all this farming and construction, why ain't not one of them send not 1% of this technology back to the continent called Africa? Why not one of them can go back and teach the same skills that they magically learned when they washed up on these shores back over there? Because the one thing I noticed, immigrants come here, they send resources back to their mother country. Even the ones, the Nigerians, Somalians that come over here now, they get resources from America and send them back to their mother country. So why ain't nobody sending none of this technology back if they came up with it here?
What are you talking about, Brother Bones? Akon did it. Convict music. Well, oh, I'm sorry. That was. I'm sorry. That's the 21st century. I'm sorry.
Timeline change.
James Comey. So
I'm gonna ask you still there. You want to? I know it's some more about that Mississippi flood, huh?
look, man, you done messed me up. You messed me up so bad with that comment. I think my mute button jumped on the floor. I had to go find it. It moved. It was like, no. So, okay, I'm gonna read some more about the flood. It says the flood affected Missouri, Illinois, Kansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and Texas. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 states.
But remember, who just got moved out there in the 1800s? So just imagine who living in these areas during this massive flood, man.
Look, man.
So-called Black Wall Street is Oklahoma.
Y'all ain't playing fair.
It says
And
our
wouldn't our ancestors at this time have trade ties with their ancestors in Arkansas, Nebraska, Texas, Louisiana, Kentucky? Couldn't it be possible these who they were doing business with? Because think about it, these so-called black areas that got so profitable, who was they trading and doing business with? They wasn't doing it with the Europeans. Think about it. You had these same cities set up in North Carolina, Rosewood, all over the place. Our ancestors were doing business with each other. That's what allowed them to be profitable. They didn't have to buy no resources or nothing from any foreigner because they were dealing with each other. You break that tie, that limits and kills your ability to generate wealth now. Remember, all tribes have particular skill sets. So now imagine once all these skill sets work together. That's a well-oiled machine now. Throw a foreign part in there. Don't even want to start up no more.
Make you not even want to drive it.
And it's the same tactics that they always use is I will destroy your infrastructure. I will bomb you to the pits of H-double hockey sticks. And then I'll come with the good book in my hand and help you to reveal to revive your place and reunite you, and we'll all come together as one. And so now you're thankful to them because they came to your neighborhood and gave you turkeys and a coat drive for Thanksgiving. Thanks, guys. We appreciate you. It's the same thing they always do. They bomb you and back into the Stone Age, and then they come and help you rebuild. We haven't seen this over and over. It sounds like a broken record. See, I'm of the days, y'all know them old 45s, you play it, and then it just starts skipping and keep playing the same. I remember I heard Gladys Knight and the Pips on the midnight train to Georgia, and it got a little scratch in it. My mom's back got a little scratch in it, and just kept on the midnight train, go, on the midnight train, go, on the midnight train. It's the same cycle, and we ain't figured it out yet. Because remember, later on in the 40s and 50s, here comes this movement of these liberals talking about, hey, civil rights movement. Yeah, we're going to help you guys. And what did we read about a few months ago? That was one individual that was a jump off, and how she was getting credit for doing all this stuff. Y'all remember that? With Dr. Martin Luther King? Y'all remember her? Okay, I yield the mic. I'm off the mic. Go ahead.
and then what they couldn't flood out or burn out, they just built interstates through it. Through the towns on the East Coast, they built interstates through the cities, separating the where the black communities were. What they call it, urban renewal.
Because they took the same trails, and everyone thinking, oh, the plan that Dwight D. Eisenhower did and reviving America in its happy days. Like you said, all they did was through all our communities. That's why I gave an example. And you got people here in Dallas when I-35 splits. You got one side is Lancaster, the other side is DeSoto, and people in DeSoto think they're better than the people in Lancaster. And I'm like, y'all are literally cousins, because one person is on one side of the freeway and the other person on the other side of the freeway. They battling each other, hate each other's guts. And I literally have relatives that, I mean, literally blood relatives that hate each other because one stays in DeSoto, the other stays in Lancaster. How dumb can you be? I yield the mic. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm back. I-95, I-85. Do I need to keep going on? All they did was take our networking, and now they don't understand that we have a way to network, and they start shutting it down because people want to start clowning and acting a fool. We have the internet work. Rebuild. I yield the mic.
Correct. Use these tools and the mechanisms of our time to rebuild our communities. Because when it's all said and done, when you're trying to point the finger, they can always point back, well, you had the ability, you had the choice, what did you choose to do? That's why I'm going to keep saying we have a choice to make. We can choose to go on as business as usual, or we can choose to be better. We can choose to be different. We can choose wisely how we spend our time moving forward. Because we all here realize that we're behind the 8 ball. We all are here because we know there's something wrong. But like we say, instead of complaining about what's wrong, the most important thing is, what can we do to fix it? What solutions can we put on the table to make it better and make sure it never happens again? That's why we say, first, start with yourself. Find out who you are. Do your genealogy. Find out where you tie into. Then once you do that, start correcting the present, your community, your individual environments. Start learning about how local politics work. Start supporting people of your community that has them goals and them intentions. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. If they studied us for 200 years, we should be at least be willing to fight for 400 to get out of it. Not saying it's going to take that long. But if these people been fighting with us, studying us for 200 plus years, there's no way we getting out of this in a couple of years, couple of months. It's not going to happen that way. Because this indoctrination was put on how many of our generations? It's about unlearning and relearning who we truly are. Not who we thought we was, who we truly are.
You might as well say the indoctrination started basically with the census, 1790. Let's just keep it with that, because that's when they started publishing companies. That's when they started publishing books. So 1790. And we all know the first book that was published in 1790, right? It was a spelling book. So, I'm just saying.
Ducks in a row.
So the last part I wanted to read about this flood, it said Arkansas was the hardest hit with 14% of its territory covered. 14% of a state covered with water. Extended from Mississippi to Arkansas and deltas. By May 1927, the Mississippi River below excuse me, let me try that again. By May 1927, the Mississippi River below Memphis, Tennessee, reached a width of 80 miles. That's wide, y'all. I'm gonna read that again. By May 1927, the Mississippi River below Memphis, Tennessee, reached a width of 80 miles wide.
Just imagine that, 80 miles wide.
I'm trying to figure out if I can see land on the other side. Is there a mist on the Mississippi?
80 miles, you can't see 80 miles and see land. No, you can't. It's not gonna happen. Not no 80 miles. Look, if you want to compare that, go to Texas. Texas is flat. See how far you see with 80 miles down the road on a Texas road. See what you get.
That's that's the size of a city, man. How about 80 miles? You know how many people you can get to live within there?
You know how many people they got out of there?
That's about right. basically removed whole cities.
So this is a part where James talks about that they admitted. It says the flood's most dramatic moment occurred on April 29th when authorities, hoping now here's the funny part. You use the term you're going to damage a levee in hopes of protecting the people. Okay, so it says flood's most dramatic moment occurred on April 29th when authorities, hoping to protect New Orleans, dynamited the levee 13 miles below the Crescent City at Carnarvon in order to flood the relatively less populated Acadian region of St. Bernard and Plaquemines parishes. And I know I've said that incorrectly, so please, people of Louisiana, forgive me.
I wonder who was living in St. Bernard's Parish. What's the history of St. Bernard's Parish?
It says, without trees, grass, deep roots, and wetlands, the denuded soil of the watershed could not do its ancient work for absorbing floodwater after seasons of intense snow and rain. Let's see, St. Bernard.
They got a weird way of
Seems like to
protecting.
me they purposely. Seems to me this is like Jane said, purposely flood in particular areas on purpose. You're saying that you're gonna break it here to flood this area.
To protect.
So after the water flood that area, where the water gonna go? They just ain't gonna walk back in.
Hold on.
Katrina before Katrina. I'm still trying to figure that out. You gonna flood the area to save the area from a flood? How?
You know I only hit you because I love you. Come on, let's go look for your other eye.
We're gonna flood the area to save it from a flood.
We are here to protect you. Please believe
That's how
me.
you get 56. That's how you get 56 feet of water in the area, purposely flooding it.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can
That
get
ain't
56.
natural.
That's the only way you can get daggone 56 feet of water. It took 40 days and 40 nights to flood the planet. Come on now. You can't. Come on, man. And it didn't even flood the whole planet. It just flooded a part of the planet. So, come on, man. Don't do that. I'm just saying. This is, I don't know.
Man, where you get some C4? I've been looking for some C4.
I see 4 right after 5. And before 3.
Just love that new math.
That's wild. New math.
Just see how they
That's
do
still
it. Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry, James. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that you see how it's done. It is to erase any sign that we were there. So that's why they keep digging and digging, and the more they keep digging now, the more they keep finding signs of us. But they're like, oh, we don't know who these people were, but they seem to have had a culture. Yeah, we had a culture, not hunter-gatherers. But it's to wipe out. But that was like I said, it's getting back to the last stand. That's why I shared before and I'll share again. It was to eliminate a specific people off the face of the earth. Because, Brother Thomas, can you go back and read again those states that this flood impacted one more time?
I sure will, James. The states that were impacted by this flood from natural rain, I'm using air quotes and rolling my eyes with the side mouth. It says the flood affected Missouri, Illinois, Kansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and Texas. 10 states. So let's put this in proper perspective. There are 48 states that are connected. You almost took a quarter of the country and flooded it. So basically, you took a fifth. You flooded a fifth of the country.
Mm-hmm. And just remember who's living in these areas between the 1920s and 1930s. What group of people who are out here at this time?
Oh, I'll give you one even better. What group of people have been living there for perpetuity? When the Europeans came, who were the people that were living on those lands? That's why I said,
Timelines.
when we look at the description of the people, this is what they keep eliminating. I mentioned two cities purposely. I mentioned DeSoto, Texas, and I mentioned Lancaster, Texas. DeSoto was named after, of course, the quote unquote explorer DeSoto that ended up getting lost, but really didn't get lost and got in trouble because he was lying about being lost. And he describes the people that lived in the area. Because remember, he came all up into Texas, and he describes the people. It's the same people that live in DeSoto today. There are people that look like you and me and those in the chat. All throughout that whole area. That's why I read about we put in there about the one point when the French were talking about the great black chief that they kept having problems with. He kept rallying the troops and slapping them in the face. They kept going to get reinforcements between the Illini and the Sioux, and he started getting alliances with the Choctaw to the south. And they still, the great black chief kept coming right behind them and slapping them in the face and telling them to get off the land. Come on, son. Why are they naming him the great? Why is he named the great black chief? Why is he named the great black chief? Come on, son. I gotta go. I yield the mic. Go ahead, y'all.
Appaloosa.
I was trying to find out what tribes were living out there in the St. Bernard's Parish in the 1920s. James, do you know what tribes? Well, I'm sure you do.
You're gonna find the Choctaw. You're gonna find what they call the Tunica. You're gonna find the Natchez. You're gonna find the Chilimacha. You're going to find the Appaloosas. All this whole area. These are the tribes that you're going to find. Again, dealing with the same allegiance. You're going to find branches of what they call the Mississippian, which we already know they all part of the same people. Other tribes, the Alabama that were there, because this was after the Indian Removal Act. So you had different tribes that kind of merged into being one. But those are the majority of the tribes that were there. Like I said, it was an effort, a united front to remove a group of people, to displace a bunch of people. And now you have the majority of people up north be like, yeah, I got people down south, but I know my great granny came from the south, and that's about it. They don't come to find out what's going on. Now you got people moving back to the south. But it's amazing, as it was read, as Brother Bones was reading, after the Civil War, no one moved from the south. They may have moved from state to another state, but they primarily stayed down south. Then all of a sudden you get to Jim Crow laws and they leave. Come on, son. I just can't. A 5-year-old can figure that out. You've been abused and misused. But wait a minute, hold on, stop. Let me do this again. Through all of that, no one is saying, let's go back to Africa. Why is that? I just put that question out there. Not a rhetorical question. I just want to know. Why is that? No one said, let's all just go back to Africa. I yield the mic.
And the tie-in, something about St. Bernard's Parish, it's the same area that took the extensive flood in during Katrina. It's the same area where the levees broke during Katrina. Same exact area, same exact neighborhoods. And if you study St. Bernard's Parish, you will come to find out some of your earliest Filipino communities in America on St. Bernard Parish. You will also learn that you have your so-called Spanish Cajuns in St. Bernard's Parish, along with different from the same area.
Looks like we lost Bones.
No, I'm still here.
Okay, so you must have. Okay, you did a copy. You muted yourself. Miss Sims. Okay, got it.
I said it's very interesting that it's the same area during the 1927 flood. It's the same area during the Katrina flood. And it states, this is under the St. Bernard's Parish, it says during the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927, New Orleans City and state leaders, again, New Orleans City and state leaders used dynamite to breach a levee. It was that Carnarvon, 13 miles below Canal Street, the part you read. It says to save the city of New Orleans from flooding. At the time, it was thought by the New Orleans residents that the dynamiting saved the city, but historians now believe that the dynamiting was unnecessary due to major upstream levee breaks that relieved pressure on the New Orleans levees. The levee breach caused flooding and widespread destruction in most of the eastern St. Bernard Parish and parts of Plaquemines Parish. Residents were never adequately compensated for their losses. Fast forward to Katrina. On August 29th, 2005, St. Bernard was devastated by Hurricane Katrina. The storm damaged virtually every structure in the parish. The eye of Katrina passed over the eastern portion of the parish, pushing 25-foot storm surges into the Mississippi River Gulf outlet. This surge destroyed the parish levees. Almost the entire parish was flooded, with most areas left with between 5 and 15 feet of standing water. The water rose suddenly and violently during a period which witnesses reported as no more than 15 minutes. In many areas, houses were smashed or washed off their foundations by a storm surge higher than the roofs.
Higher than the hoofs.
Raise the roof.
And I'll dig up the audio, but I interviewed a family that was there that lived close to the levees, and they heard 2 distinct booms. Then all of a sudden, literally the floodgates opened. Remember, initially they had interviewed after the hurricane and they said, oh, and it was like, lower shin level was the water. They had the reporters out there. Look at them in their little rain boots and their little galoshes. Look at them, and they will say, "Oh, yeah, the worst is over." But I'll dig up that audio. It goes way back, but I'm gonna dig up that audio, and you're gonna hear the young lady on there when she's talking about she heard 2 booms. Then within minutes, here comes the flood.
And what they say, in 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, you had surges higher than the roof of a house. You talking what, 10, 11, 12 feet. Ain't enough rain. Man, look at here.
The same areas, the same states, which you will find the Alabama, the Uli, were the same states that were hit. It's not a coincidence, because we hate history. Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, just saying no.
Because we hate, you hear it all the time from us, we hate history. because they get us stuck between 1492 and 1968. That's it. You don't hear anything else us before that. We never existed. We're just here. But that is the history of the African American. You're right, African Americans. You did not exist prior to 1492. And then, well, 1492 to current. That's your history right there. That is your history. So you got about what 520 and 20 some odd years of your history, and that's all you get, because that's what you're claiming, and that's who you are. Although Christopher Columbus didn't bring quote unquote African slaves over here, he took Indians back to Europe. But we leave that out. I'm sorry, I digress. Thank you, Natchez. I yield the mic.
Huh.
If you would have just built your little forts made out of straw and mud, instead of you turning around and you building these great edifices that they could not bomb, and they turn around and call them missions today. Look up all of the missions that you find throughout the South, these so-called Spanish missions. They didn't build Dum Dum Diddy. Those places were always there. They just renamed it. Go to the Alamo. Come on, son. They let y'all fool yourself. And if you keep thinking that, and I'm not saying, because there really are African Americans out there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to bash African Americans. If you African American, you be the best that you can be. I'm simply saying, when you have bamboozled a group of people into thinking that they can go to certain places and cry because that's where they are from, but then you make fun of people that go to the Wailing Wall in Israel when they keep bumping their heads against the wall. And all I know is people that do that are they special needs or they little kids that bump their head in the corner when you tell them to go in a timeout. That's why I don't do timeout. I yield the mic. Go ahead. Knock yourself out. Literally,
Ding, ding.
keep banging your head on the wall.
Do it. Oh, somebody in the chat asked the question, was Davy Crockett a Negro?
Davy Crockett was a Melungeon. So technically you could say he was part Negro. He had a little Negro in him. He had Negro-like. He was a Negroid. So yeah, he was a Melungeon. That's why I say again, these different names that they are giving you, those volunteers from Kentucky and Tennessee are nothing but these Melungeons, which are your Sioux. These are the same folk. That's why you see the Sioux, and you see, okay, you read about, Brother Thomas read earlier about the Sioux and the Illini. Why are they coming down? You're like, wait a minute, why are the Illini and the Sioux? They all the way up north. What are they doing trying to come down south to fight the Natchez? For what? That is why when you hear the Sioux talk about their history, like, oh, we didn't hear it like that. Yeah, because you're speaking from an invader's perspective. I'm sorry. Okay, I got to go. I'm sorry. Not here to start a war again. I got to go. Go ahead, Brother Thomas. Take us home.
Tell it like it is. Ain't nothing wrong with that. The truth must come out. Let it free. We here to get it right, not be right.
Just find out what happened in Cincinnati. Read about the compromise of what happened. Then you start to realize, because why would it? I say again, that's why I asked this question a long time ago. When have you read that the Sioux came down and helped any of the Catawba Saponi? Ever. But yet they find themselves all in Arkansas, all in Louisiana, all in Texas, all in Mississippi, trying to wipe out the Natchez. But you never hear about them getting involved with any other battles to help the Indians down south with the invaders? Not one time. I want somebody to show me, because I've been wrong a few times in my life, and it won't hurt my feelings if you show me I'm wrong one more time. I yield the mic.
Yeah, this is where we would have an explosion, but we're low on resources, so boom. How about that? Anyway,
Pew, pew.
I really want to know, because we're seeing, and like I said, I'm here to tell you, I know the role and knew the role that the Choctaw played, because again, here's where the split took place. This is why you have the Oklahoma Choctaw and the Mississippi Choctaw, because some of the Choctaw remain faithful to the Chickasaw and the Natchez. And then some of us split off and decided that we're going to go with the French, and now they're the ones get pizzade in Oklahoma. Follow the breadcrumbs. You find out who is who. And like I say again, when people leave, and I know some people are going to say, oh no, that didn't happen. I'm going to show you an example. Because my people, when I tell you my people along my line of my genealogy, went back down into Mexico to recruit the rest of the Indians, the Maya, the Oli that were down in Mesoamerica. And you will find them, because here's how they do it. You'll find them as now Afro-Mexicans that came down to run away from slavery. Nonsense. They already been there. Look up, all I want y'all to do is do a search on Afro-Mexicanos. And you're gonna see, and they say, oh, they always get, the slavery. They were running away from slavery. Where were they running from, and how do they know to come into Mexico? Come on, son. How do they know to come into Mexico? See, these are the questions that we have to start asking ourselves. And why do they have us on the walls? And again, you read before about everything that was said about, we asked the Mexicans and they say we didn't build any of this. And now we're coming to find out that these structures are much older than the Mexicans we've been speaking with. So this civilized group of people, the idea, like I said, we did this last week, how he gently went over those things and then says, they had a centralized government, they had fortified cities. So now, but if you flood it out, then it never existed. And if the people are pushed out, it never existed. And you drive down there along I-10 now, and you will hear, that's why I say you heard Chief Warhorse, you go down there now, and it looks the same way it did what happened with Katrina. They never fixed it. Look at Slidell, Mississippi. They'll never rebuild in these places. Think about it. If they flood it out and wipe it out and then build on top of that, and now you got a luxurious golf course, then you can't do any excavations, because you're gonna get shot trying to go to their country club, start digging and say, these are my people. They know who we are. We don't know who we are.
I can't remember the Mexican president back at that time that basically stated, if I'm right, he got assassinated, but he stated that it was an open border for us to come back in. Basically, he invited us to come back in to go back. I got to look it back up to get his name. By the time I get it, I'll post it up in the forum.
Yes, sir. If you hadn't asked me, I could have told you. When he was really saying, you know how they had the commercial, come back to Jamaica, come back home, that's exactly what this Mexican president was saying, to come back home. And they don't want you to leave, but they don't want you to leave to go there, because that would be a big boost in the Mexican economy, and the U.S. will suffer. But they want you to go to Ghana. Why? Because they already have a deal with Ghana. And now you're going to start to figure out this deal with Ghana is going to lead back to the American Colonization Society between the United States and Great Britain. It hasn't changed. Your DNA test going back to Sierra Leone, Ghana, Congo, which never existed until here recently. Oh yeah, I'm South African Bantu. Why do they want you to go there so badly? Because you're gonna come with your westernized way of thinking and try to take over, and then you're gonna be like, oh yeah, look how I'm big balling, shot calling. So now when you leave, more people can take your land. Again, your genealogy ties you back to your land. You can't have a big influx of people without having a mass exodus of another group of people. It's just not going to happen that way.
Using you to colonize Africa. Using you to colonize Africa. Using you to take this American way of thinking, these colonized mindsets, and taking it someplace else. Think about it. The world knows the music we make, the things that we do, people tend to follow. So now what happens when you taint the creators of this stuff? Now you use these same people that created all these wonderful things for the world, you use them to spread foolishness across the world. They do it in our name, they do it in our image, they do it in our voices. That's all it is. Everybody's racing to still colonize Africa. America still has colonies. They never let them go. Y'all better look up and see who still has colonies in 2019.
Yep. In case you didn't know, this question for here is for Brother Thomas and Thomas. Brother Thomas and Associates. Doing all of this discussion of them trying to wipe the Natchez of the earth, why is there no mention of the Itza, the Catawba Saponi?
That's a good question. I don't know. Can you share? Tell us why.
I'll give you the answer. The reason being is the same reason why they don't discuss the Huguenots, the same reason why they don't discuss the Vikings. They would have to say, okay, who, because if you notice, you don't hear about these battles coming by water. They're coming by land. Because the Catawba Saponi was still controlling the Gulf of Mexico. That is why there was no great influx of all of these French coming over, and why later on, as you will read about Napoleon, you gotta think Napoleon was all over in Africa, all over in Egypt, Kemet, shooting cannons off the face of the Sphinx. But yet, little old IT put those hands of death on them. How? Because they could not get their ships into the Caribbean because the Itza still control the waters.
At this time, they called you Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yahtzee, Jack Sparrow, that would be you. Not some European with a wooden leg that somebody keep trying to tell you. Because you had the macaw on your shoulder. Think about it. I yield the mic.
Yeah, boom. TMH. Boom.
Because that's the same reason why you don't hear about the Natchez and these forts. You all there, oh, they living in teepees. We never, and that's why, because we never lived in teepees. We had hot ovens. That's why we were making hot water cornbread. Yep. We had hot ovens. You can't make tortillas without a hot oven. Come on, son. You can't make tamales without a hot oven. We wasn't eating raw meat, eating raw vegetables and stuff like that. Come on, man. Making cornmeal? Come on, man. We were not living in teepees, but you never heard that. You never saw it on TV. You always say, well, and then they coming out of, come on, man. Come
Who
on.
taught the so-called African how to process cornmeal to turn it into all the different things that we use in our culture? Who?
They just learned it from the sky. They just got on their knees one day and prayed to the sun, and they were like, oh yeah, if you take this particular crop and you grind it up, and then you can do cereal and all the rest of it. Come on, son. Come on, man. Just out of the blue, they started making cornmeal. They just came to them in a dream. Come on, man. I'm sorry.
Not to be funny. Not to be funny, no disrespect to the continent. And like I said again, my two youngest stepsisters are from there. But show me the so-called African that know about grits, corn, hominy, porridge. I'm talking about corn porridge. Old school cornbread. You know, the kind that look like pound cake.
Yep. When you pat it together, you see your granny when she run the cold water on her hands before she touches it, so it can stick together, and put it in that pan and watch it fry. Because I've literally heard West Africans when they say that, like, cornbread, what is this? They have no idea what it is. They will literally say it like, what is this? Come on, son.
Oh, them Johnny cakes. Cornbread looking like pancakes. I know about them Johnny cakes.
But Thomas, I still hope you're in your chair, sir. You mean to knock you off the chair over there. But just had that question, just wondering why they don't mention you all. Mysteriously, just don't mention you all. Because it would have to explain, again, the Navy. And they would have to explain again how the British Navy became so strong. And they would have to explain again that during the War for Independence and the War of 1812, why the British were so unsuccessful, but yet they took over every other colony that the Dutch had. Because remember, what we know as New England area used to be New Amsterdam, and they changed the name. And then they hit New York to put their British spin on everything. But why is it when it came to the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, this great British army that was taking over all of these in West African coast that the Dutch had set up shop, just there on the coast, wasn't going deep into Africa. Everywhere you found the Dutch, you find the British. But when it came to here, why couldn't they? And why could they only take over the New England states? Why couldn't they penetrate any further south? Why were they sending convicts into Georgia and to penetrate Florida, and they still couldn't do it? Why didn't they start in the Carolinas and in the Virginia area? Because they couldn't do it. Who was there? Who was controlling the coast? Think about it. I yield the mic.
That lets you know why during the 1700s and 1800s, they're talking about the North area. If you notice, when we was doing the history, you don't hear about too many more tribes in the North like that. A lot of them been assimilated and became part of the United States government. I mean, it is what it is.
The cutoff is the Mason-Dixie line. And you will hear me say that repetitively, because they know that once you find out where the cutoff line was, then you'll realize what tribes did what and how they were involved and how they became one with these other groups of people. But I just really want to know, how did we go from building fortified cities to living in teepees? Because I haven't seen it. I know the Plains Indians, what you know as Native Americans, lived in teepees because they were nomadic people. But why, as my grandmother say, why on God's green earth would cultivators live in temporary dwelling places? And you read all the time that it was these people, the Mississippi culture, they call it, that built mounds. And there's a difference between a mound and what we call a pyramid. They built mounds and then built their houses on top of those mounds. Why? Because we knew about the flooding in the area that could come at times. We were here long enough to know that there was a great flood that took place that people try to say, oh no, it didn't happen, or it was just a local flood. No, they built their structures on top of mounds to get to the high ground. Even in the old story of the Choctaw and the Chickasaw, when we were once one, when it came with the red sticks, said when the waters receded and we were able to walk and they settled in Naya Waya, the great mother mound, you're gonna see we were already here long enough to know that there was a great flood. And you're gonna find a whole lot of treasures in the Gulf of Mexico, which gets back to Tenochtitlan and Tenochtitlan, why they built that artificial island, because it was to resurrect the land that is now underwater. Thanks, Natchez. I yield this cotton picking mic.
No problem.
Place explosion here. Boom. Oh man.
I mean, and even not to be funny, why the rest of the world fry their fish in flour or some type of tempura, but to this day we still fry in cornmeal? Where we get that from? The Indian diet consisted of corn. You ever notice the majority of our diet, if you really think about it, is based on corn? Look at a lot of the foods that we naturally can eat. Now you have to ask yourself, why would they change the corn? Why would they genetically modify it and change it? Who does it hurt the most?
Yeah.
You can't have those pancakes without that corn syrup.
Corn syrup.
Moonshine, aka Jick, made from that corn and them taters. Think about it. There was a movie. Oh man, but no, Stella, help me out, and then I am gonna be quiet. There was a movie based on a true story about three brothers, and they were moonshine. And I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's a good movie. And one of them thought that he actually walked to the hospital. He got his throat slit, and he made a bad deal with some guys, and ended up being his slash girlfriend or the one that was working at their place. Ended up taking him to the hospital. But anyway, they were getting their moonshine from the colors.
It was a lawless with Shia LaBeouf in them.
There you go. Woo! Yeah, that's it. When he was a little brother. That's right. That's right. Look at that movie Lawless. It's gonna tell you they were getting the moon, and this is a true story. When you read that, when you look at that, of course they fantasize some things, but it was a true story. And you're gonna find out they were going down and they were getting the moonshine before they set up their own factories and learn how to do it from the colors. This is doing prohibition. Still making that jig.
Mm-mm-mm.
So don't let them fool you into thinking that all of a sudden you come over here from another continent. You have no culture. They keep talking about all this African foods, but where are these African dishes? I see them in places like DC and New York, where there's a great intermixing or intermingling of cultures. But you see it in Atlanta now, because now everybody's drawn to Atlanta because that's the mecca of the South again. But you don't see these African dishes that they keep talking about, especially as you get into the mainland and off the coast. Where are all these dishes that because again, you would keep some type of custom of what you were doing. No, and you keep talking about,
You
the
said
dance.
where? My question is what dishes? I don't know a dish. I'm not familiar with African dishes, actually.
That's exactly my point. How? Because you're gonna remember how to eat. But then they keep talking about the drums. There were drums here and drumsticks.
Mic check, Thomas.
Yep.
Is that my background?
Say again.
No, I just heard some background noise. My bad.
So, before we get on up out of here, let these good people go on with their day. Is there anything that anybody want to bring forth and remind everybody, or anybody you want to give anybody a homework assignment there? Sir Doodle Vision.
Just again, look at the Natchez and look at the wording that you keep reading from the French, in that they wanted to destroy them. And you keep reading, they were a nation no more. They were a nation. You're going to keep hearing that over and over and over. But then you'll read that the French left. The French troops left. And then put that in the timeline with all this going on again in the 1700s. Look at the Chickasaw, Choctaw wars, and then then continue with the Red Stick Wars, and then go into the War of Independence. All of this starts tying in. Then come back again, more Red Stick Wars. Then you get into the War of 1812. Then you get into more Red Stick Wars. Then you get into the Indian Removal Act. And look at Andrew Jackson when he was General Andrew Jackson, and the role that was played in the War of 1812. Look at what he did in McIntosh, then keep studying and look at the Civil War. But then go back and look at the Haitian Revolution. And that's why I say again, why are tribes from Florida going into IT to fight the French? This was a continuation. The wars never stopped. Never stopped. And like I said, they slowed down, but you think it's by accident that Black Wall Street, all these other places that were known as quote unquote Negro towns or Black towns, why were they destroyed? Why were they destroyed? And like I said, this was happening after World War I. Think about it. It did not start until then, and then you turn around, you get the Great Flood of 1927. Then you get the stock market crash. Then you get Bow. Then you're getting the Great Depression. Then you're going to get into World War II. And then these colored troops that come back and say, hey, we went all over the world to fight evil, and we can't even be considered as equal over here. Think about it. There is a connection. If you want to get rid of a people,
the New Deal. The New Deal.
Look at that New Deal. And look at that spin on how it came to those PIH codes, because there are no HUD codes. Those PIH codes under this New Deal. Start looking at this New Deal and how we got washed away, literally washed away off of our land. And then all of a sudden, they started giving land to these white, quote unquote, farmers. Why were they given land? Why was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King so upset and like, wait a minute, why are they getting these? We taught them how to farm, and then they get money, and then once they learn, we taught them how to farm, they kick us off the land. Why is it when you go to LSU and Baton Rouge, they are the #1 school for agriculture? Just look up Baton Rouge, just look up LSU. Look up LSU. Look at their history on how they were founded. Think about it. They literally washed us off of our land and replaced with themselves. But again, hopefully we can get to Texas, because that was Armageddon, and you're gonna start seeing going on. Remember, Texas was all up into Oklahoma as well. Well, we know it's the state of Oklahoma as well, but you're gonna find out the things that happened. Natchez, I'm glad you took your stand. I am so proud of you for what you have done by way of the ships. So I appreciate y'all more than you ever know. And the Tuscarora that were up north, you were still holding down the fort, even though they try to write y'all out of history too. Look at all these different tribes on how they keep trying to write you out of history, and how all of these government buildings that had all these records all of a sudden keep catching on fire. You would think the most protected buildings in a county would never catch on fire. Come on, son. I yield the mic. Y'all be good to each other.
All right. Appreciate that, James. Man. So I guess I'll go and then let Losala go, and then we let Bones go. Is that what we doing? No. Yes. Anyway.
Y'all have a great grand rest of your day. Link in the chat. Peace, y'all.
I hate you. I hate you. Again, peace and grand rising to the new subscribers and the Attackless Assembly silent majority. We definitely appreciate y'all. It is the best chat on earth. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for staying with us and through this rising as we were forced to restart 4 or 5 times. So we thank you for coming out. We thank you for the strong support. Appreciate you and all you do. Thank you for holding our feet to the fire. And with that, I'm going to let Bones H. McCoy do what he do, and then he can take us out. All right, relinquish the mic.
All right, like to thank the panel again for the great work that they do every rising. So keep the show going on consistently with the information. I'd like to thank the chat, the ones that's active every rising with the questions, those of you who push links that make the show what it is, those who are in the background, the silent majority, who listen to the information, pass it on, apply it to their lives. Like I said, it takes everybody to make this possible. And on that note, the reason why we study history isn't to dwell on it, to get stuck there. It's to learn what happened, why it happened, who we are, and what part we played. And we do that so we can apply it to the present, to address it accordingly, so therefore we can have a better future. So let's make sure when we get together with this information that it goes beyond us just showing up on a live stream, that when these live streams stop, that's when the real work begins. That's when we are in our households as individuals, getting ourselves correct, passing this information and this knowledge amongst our family members, then our neighbors, then our communities. And that's how we'll make real change. We done seen so many other groups come to our homeland, again, our homeland, and take advantage of programs that were designed for us. Relatives, this is not the time to be complaining and whining about it. This is the time that we activate. This is the time that we get our houses in order and move accordingly to start taking advantage of these programs to rebuild our great communities. So on that note, everyone continue to have a very blissful Monday. And until the next Rising Show, peace.
Peace, y'all.
Warning, warning, warning. Hard hats, pickaxe, shovels, boots required.